Hello, this is Kelly Borsheim again. I'm here to talk about composition developing. I haven't finished the drawing of the figures yet, but I've got the ideas coming out. So now what I want to do is start working on the overall concept of how much contrast and lighting I want to change. So I think I mentioned earlier that this little smudge turned out cool because it looks like a shadow of the arm here, but also the point of this project was about movement and dance. So I want to have it feel like they're not frozen in the air, that things are moving. So I had started to play with this here, putting a little light as if the foot had gone, up and down. But I realized later that that's a mistake, because if you're going to be jumping up in the air from the ground the way the man is, whereas the bird's coming from the sky probably, he's actually going up into this movement, which granted, he will have to come down from this movement, but coming down from a movement seems a little bit on the negative, right? We always like anticipating the future more than we enjoy the aftermath of something. So I want the uplifting thing, which means that I need to put some shapes down here to imply the movement here. Do you see how I'm erasing that with my finger there? I want to have something like this happening. So in this direction. And again, the same with the arm, although I'm thinking right now I like this idea of the arm here. The arm maybe can be frozen, and then this arm up here can be doing the thing. And the same thing, the arms are going to go back this way. So I'm thinking if I can do something to imply movement in here. The other thing is I want to start developing the darks, and charcoal can only go so dark. So I want to, do you see how I've added the rays here? Here is my inspiration. It's an IKEA is how they pronounce it in Italy. IKEA brochure for a bedroom. And I don't know if that's actually paint or the actual reflections, but I like the stair step stuff. So you can see I've kind of taken that here to give me a little bit of drama in the background. I don't want it to overtake the figure, because really I think I want the owl to be the main subject. So he's a white owl. Overall, he's going to be the largest white space in the thing, because you can see I'm rounding the torso and making it a little bit darker. So these are the considerations. I really want to darken this area here, and even though I've got light coming out of here and I've got light up in the rays, I don't really want that to be the strongest light thing. I want the focus to stay on the owl. And so in order to do that, the tone is going to have to reinforce everything that I want to have the eye go where it is. The diagonals are giving a lovely energy dynamic, and the diagonals here, and the triangle, this is one triangle, and then this is several other triangles. And so that's the way my world goes, is all triangles. But I want the ideas to reinforce things. But again, I want the tones here to suggest the dimensions. There are certain things. You see how I did the dark here behind on the thigh, and I made the background light enough that it really looks more dimensional here. I get more dimension, the bird comes out towards me, and that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be trying to playing with now. I'll still be developing the hand and the face and the details and fix the owl and excuse me, and stuff like that. However, I want to start developing the thing as a whole. So you've heard me say in other videos, that I want to fix the worst first. And right now that is starting to be that I need this area to be darker. So that is going to go in. Also at the top, I want to make sure that wherever I decide to cut it off, I don't have the light pulling you out of the frame. So I'm going to mute that down. And maybe what it is taking this side beam right here and knocking the tone down so it doesn't receive straight light coming through there. Because theoretically speaking, the light is actually coming behind here, falling through the slats. So that would make, I can easily darken these down to some. So there's that so again. All right, so here you go. Whoops, I did it again. Okay. Hello, this is Kelly Borsheim again, and I'm developing this ceiling at the top, because again, I had nothing really going on at the top and I wanted to develop that a little bit before I continue on to determine the tones of everything. I once heard that on every artwork, every four corner of the quadro of the painting or the drawing should be different tone, maybe different calmness or busyness. I think that's a nice thing to think of, and it's kind of a cool thing to check if it's an issue, but I wouldn't make it define your composition. However, anyway, so what I did was I laid this drawing down on my table flat so that I could take a ruler, and I took one of my little Nitram charcoal pencils here and drew with the ruler to reinforce these lines here. Even though you can see from the rays down here, I've got soft lines and everything, and I'm likely to soften this, but for now I needed to redefine where it was, because what I have found with my own viewing of things is that if you draw a straight line and you've got a little wiggle in it, people see it right away and they judge it, and it's not a good thing. If you intend to change architecture or have maybe a stone poking out too much in a building, you have to do it in a way where it's actually intentional, because if it just looks like an accident, for example, you see here it looks like there's a little curvy right under there. Okay, people are going to see that and notice that, and then it's going to be an annoyance, and you don't want any part of your art to be an annoyance, but that's what happens when you have realism. People tend to judge it for what it's not for what it is. I hate to say that, but it's true. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was that I took my stick here and really pushed this in a lot. But I know that if I touch this a bit, it's going to lighten up a bit, because that's part of the thing I like about charcoal, is its subtlety. But also, this paper, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this paper has a lot of tooth to it. It has a very good texture to it. In some ways, it resists the charcoal, I find, and in other ways it doesn't. You can see here where I've added some pastel. Okay, do you see the texture that's in there? So, anyway, I don't mind the texture at all. Here's another point, because my brain digresses. I'm using this set of pastels that I bought. That's a gradation of color. But you can see it goes, there's a series of warms here, and then even the dark is still a warm dark. But I like to use these in a charcoal drawing because they're just, I like the warmer colors than a cold black and white, for depending on what it is. But generally, I like them. Anyway, but you can see that the color is different from the charcoal. And that's fine. It doesn't matter so much to me. But anyway, I'm just pointing that out. All right, so getting back to this, what I did now is I stuck it back into on my easel to see what it looks like in the hole. And it's interesting judging it as I'm filming, even through the camera, because I thought before that the dark there would be too annoying and take away from the main subject. And I don't find it is. What I do find is, do you see I've got some dark here and I've got some dark here. I still want to push this darker. I haven't added the dark yet, but I can see how it relates to itself now, that I really need to darken this, which is fine. I need to keep it lighter if I want to keep these rays coming through for the idea, but other than that, everything needs to be relative. And once I put this dark in, I'll know more about how dark to put this in. So getting back to this, again, I've got sharp lines up here and then soft rays coming through. I may tighten up the soft rays, but my inclination has been that I want to go back to painting more like Eugène Carrière, not back to, I don't know that I've ever done that really well, but I find that on a lot of artworks, what moves me emotionally the most is soft edges on everything. And not necessarily everything, but you pick and choose, but I would say I'd feel more emotional about a piece of art that was all soft edges than one that was all hard edges. I see hard edges a lot, especially for people that paint with acrylic, because it dries so quickly, and you have to be very conscious to make edges soft. So I've learned that about myself and my aesthetic. So coming back up into here, now, if the light is coming from a source that's up in here and sliding through these slats, now you can see a lot clearer the 3 dimensions thing of what I'm doing. I've got, this is the bottom, so obviously it's on the exact opposite side of where the light source is, so these are going to be dark. compared to the side. The side planes will have a little bit of light coming around here to lighten this. Excuse me. Okay, so where was I after my phone call? We were talking about the physical things of the light. So the light source is coming from back up here and shining down. These sides here are directly opposite of the direction of the light, so they're going to be darkest. And the sides are going to have light bouncing around to the side here because some of that's going to get some. But also these beams will have a little bit more light because the light source, let's say the sun for easiness, is going to hit the other side, the side facing this. Oops, sorry, I let the video go down. Okay, so the sun is coming here, coming down through the slat. Now this slat is facing this one that we can't see, but it's there, so they're closer together. So these will receive more light than this one here that's got nothing bouncing against it. So there will be light on the sides more than the underside. Okay, then what I also see is there's not going to be a consistent darkness here, because technically what's happening is as the light comes down, let's say this is an actual wall, as it is in the IKEA catalog, the light is going to come hit this. Now these, where the line goes straight up, they're going to go up. Let's see how I did. Oops, I got to stop pointing down. Low. Okay, so anyhow, the wall's going to come up. You can see this maybe here. I'm going to have a little bit of this tone coming up on the side to where it meets the actual end of the thing here. This is not good. This is me working out what tones I want. So you're going to have a shadow that's closest to where this meets the wall of this plane. Okay, so you're going to have a shadow of this. The rest of this is going to be this light from this wall is there. The light that shines down on this will be reflected back up into this. So technically, these bars here are going to be lighter in this area because they're getting light from different directions, also hitting the underside. And then as we go off here again, they get darker. So right now, I've just colored in this fairly solid. But the beautiful thing about charcoal is I can go in and subtly remove stuff by running, remember my hard tip brush here that I cut. I actually cut it off, and it's kind of funny because it kind of looks like my hair when I do a bad job of it. I don't really care so much if my hair is even or anything. Okay, yeah, I can really see the thickness. Do you see I made a mistake even with the ruler there? So I'll have to straighten up that line a little bit. So anyhow, the other thing is I just walked back from this after my phone call and saw that it's too contrasty right now for me because, again, I don't want the eye. The eye is always going to the place of high contrast, which at this point is going to be those black and white bars because you're repeating it so it makes a shape that your eye goes directly to it. I don't want the eye to go there. I want the eye to go to the owl. So, and then secondary to the dancer. So I don't want any of these rays competing, and I don't want this cross thing competing. So it's all going to be relative. But again, it's too early for me to really judge that because by the time I add the black here, black pastel, because I want it to be darker than I can get the charcoal to be, and gradated on up, all of a sudden things are going to start developing and changing. Everything's going to be relative. So it could be that I'm going to lighten the charcoal that's underneath the underside of these beams, and I definitely have to tone down the sides of the beams are not going to be just paper white. They're going to be put down in relationship, just like the owl. I've got the highlight on the owl's wing, and then I've got the regular white wing. So you can see that even though he's a white owl, I'm still getting two different kinds of white. The highlight has to be only the paper, unless I later decide to add white pastel. I haven't gone into that decision yet. Sometimes I only like to put white pastel on something that's a colored paper. And otherwise, I like the idea that, like stone carving, you leave, or watercolor, you leave what is white stays just the paper. Okay, so here I've taken a little bit of a lighter gray and gone over it like this, scribbling, as I did when I was street painting in Florence, Italy. my first use of pastels. And then I'm going over it with the black. Part of the reason I'm going over the black first is because this lighter color is going towards a brown. It's going warmer compared to the charcoal. Can you see the difference on that? It's a warm color, this is a cool color. You always have a problem, or at least I always have a problem, getting the pastel to mix with the charcoal, because the charcoal has a tendency to lift up too fast. But what I usually do is I start with the pastel, and I get the pastel in the areas that I want it and work up into the line. And then I work the charcoal and get up into the line. And I wait for the blending section to happen very delicately when I'm ready for it, because I feel like I need to make a decision overall. So for example, when I darken this, I really loved how the legs started popping out at me. Do you see really it comes forward? But then I end up having a problem that this is too light. It's too contrast. And again, I don't want the eye to go here. So even though this is a light strip on the pattern, it needs to still go dark to match with this. So and also as it goes down, this line here is going to be softer and blended. So I'll be adding in some dark here, and I can do some with the charcoal, but there's a point. Well, that's a bad piece of charcoal. Some of the charcoal, it's not bad. It's a different grade for making light colors. But see here, I can add some of this in to get it darker here to make my decision. And so anyhow, going back to this, because my brain tends to travel a lot. So I basically you can tell I'm right-handed because all my strokes are going up like this. It's funny, if I were left-handed, they'd be going down this way. It may not matter. So then I take my pinky, because I love touching everything, and I find that if I can push this in to the grooves of the paper, I get more of a nice smooth finish than actually just scrubbing. Do you see the difference in the texture? The scrubbing is a nice technique. You can lose that a lot for a lot of things to advantage. But in this point, I'm going for a softer background look, so I don't want the texture to pull the eye into it. So I'm going to be doing this. Now, I can push some of this over because I know this line's going to be softened. And maybe it's going to lift off some of that charcoal, but for right now I'm okay with this. Again, I'll leave the line markings for later to pay attention to. My main problem is that in the transition, it's hard to remember that I've still got to keep everything in focus. I'm really loving the contrast that's happening, because to me this owl is really starting to come out as the dramatic light hitting it that I want. But you'll see that on the gradation here, I go from dark, and then I need to get going up lighter as I come closer to the source, okay? So here's the thing. Right now, I've got a dark leg with a shadow of the leg rounding into the cylinder form here of the leg. And then the same on this side, a dark leg rounding in. I like the effect of this dark having the lighter background behind it, okay? It really rounds the leg out and it pulls the figure forward. But here you can see a halo. Do you see? I don't want this halo coming up. I stopped there on purpose because I need to make a decision, and that decision will happen once I get all the other background stuff started to be in relationship with itself. Then I make a decision, because look at the gray that's up in between here. I've got it lighter than the dark of the leg, and yet here it's darker than the light of the leg. So, and the same thing with the owl. I've got his little talons kind of coming out are the darkest thing, and then I've got this is light here, dark for the leg, and light for the this relationship here is really, really working well, because there's no confusion particularly between the angles, but yet I'm still getting enough soft transitions. However, how do I make that blend with the rest of this? Because this is going to end up being darker, and how much I have to decide. But it probably depends on how much of a drama queen I want to be on this piece, and frankly I like to be a drama queen. I love the light just really coming out of the darkness, but I still want to keep my stripy pattern. So again, everything's relative, and here you can see, for example, this is a great example, the dark beam is darker behind the body and the body rounds up in front of it, but if I do it well, the body will be obviously in front of this background, and then the owl is going to catch more light. It's going to be even in front of the body. So these are the decisions I'm making right now, and this is one reason it's very important to get the background in way before you actually start doing more. That's why I haven't developed the figures anymore. I wanted to get the shapes and positions of the feet and hands in general, but I'm going to wait because the tone that I set for them will really depend on what is surrounding them. So, and I want to keep the lost edges and looseness, so I have to be very careful here that I don't make everything too contrasty. And in this case, I'm pretty sure that too contrasty means this is probably going to go darker, so that I minimize this contrast here to make more of a contrast between my subject and the background, if that makes any sense at all. I don't want this to be the star of the show. I want this to be the star of the show. Okay? Happy drawing. Thanks for watching. This is Kelly Borsheim at borsheimarts.com. Now, I've done a lot on the top here where I'm actually looking at the drawing upside down because I wanted to sit down for a bit and give my knee a break, but also I found it's easier to work on this horizontal. So I've been taking my brush, dipping it into my powdered chalk. Sometimes I dab it over here, sometimes I dab it on my hand, but in general I know I want this side to be the darker, less contrast up here, so I'll start over here and work my way and pull it forward. Now even on the white parts I'm going to work on the dark and pull it forward, because if I put it here I've just put a dark spot and it may or may not stain the paper. Depends on the paper actually. Sometimes the paper does things that surprises me. So I'm coming over here, but what I want to do is make sure that I don't get a halo. A halo is where I have dark, light, and dark when I have two planes. It breaks the breaks the illusion. A halo does. A halo is not a good thing in this sense. So I don't necessarily want to lose the planes, although as I get further in the distance, this part here being further back distance from the viewer, and this is closer to the viewer. So these lines should remain sharper because they're closer to me, and then these can go a little bit softer. However, I don't want to make it look like all of a sudden this is a rounded object. I need it to remain that this is a beam. So that's one of the things that I'll always keep in mind as I'm doing this. But right now I was trying to knock back all the white. Now, do you see this? What I wanted to point out is that when I was applying this, it seems so much darker than something I was telling myself gets a lot of light. But it's really relative, again, to the rest of the things surrounding it. So what I mean is that when you do the exercise of painting a white porcelain object with a highlight, the highlight has to be the whitest white paint you can get with absolutely nothing in it. And what you learn is to have that highlight really seem like a highlight, you have to darken the white vase, the porcelain object, a lot more dramatically than what you logically think is going to work. But it won't work visually if you don't do that. So it's a great project to do, to teach yourself more about relativity in tone and things. So I highly encourage you to do that. But make sure you put the white object with other dark objects so that you can get a real understanding of tone and how dark your white object needs to be, because yeah, it's a surprising thing. So anyway, the point is that even though this looks really dark, if I keep the things separate, you're still going to see the separate light in there, okay? And the thing is, I want it dark here, and then it gradually comes light again, as I spoke about in the earlier video. It's the gradation of tone that gives you that dimension for things. And also, it's interesting to have different parts of the canvas have different things going on. Whoops, the handle for my camera, whoops. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with this. The thing I find is, okay, you see here's a technical example. Do you see that in this bar right there, there is a dark spot that appears to be something that's in the paper, that it's maybe a little crease or something that the charcoal just kind of sucked into and it won't come out. So what will happen is later, when I get closer to finishing touches and stuff, I find that will be a distraction right there. So I'll take this kneadable eraser, pull it up to a very fine point, twisting until a fine point, and I'll end up picking that out. However, because I'm not done, do you see how it's putting a halo in there now? And it's still got the dark in there. So it could be that what I will do is manually come in here, take out the whole area, even if I need to get a stronger eraser, really suck down in there. Maybe I'll even put a little tiny vacuum cleaner on it. like what, for cleaning for computers. I don't know if that would work or not, but I'll pull out that dark, and then I'll do the dark stuff around it, being careful to push up to the edge of the crease and not get into it. But again, that's a very small detail, and it could be that by the time the drawing is done, it may be that the rest of this becomes darker, that this is such a non-issue, and it's also out of the far part of the frame. But you do have the things with working with the papers, especially handmade papers, that sort of thing can happen. So, and you see here I've got the shadows going here. It's a dimensional thing, but also it's interesting to have the movement of tone and things like that. So it's part of developing the entire piece. I can see now this is far too light, and I'll be darkening that. But right now I like how this face is popping out against a background. And the thing is, if you do the typical thing of, well, you've got light there, make it really, really, really dark. There is a point where that isn't going to work for you as popping out. It's going to look like the figure is cut out and pasted on top of your dark background. So there are ways that you can do that to avoid that happening. So I do like this subtle thing here because, again, that's not necessarily the subject as much as the owl is, from my point of view. And so I'll probably be darkening a little bit of this to knock down the high contrast here so that doesn't take too much attention away. Thanks for watching again. This thing is going to happen.